Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. And it seems for whatever reason, there's a theme of this week. Don't get used to it. It's not going to happen ever again. But as it happens, I've been talking about artists that are musical survivors in the sense that they were able to not only sustain, but in many cases build careers over many decades with many changing musical styles. And one of my favorite singers, Perry Como, was very much able to do this. Obviously, he had his early beginnings with Glenn Miller, who I talked about earlier. He provided vocals to the Miller Band's performance of Chattanooga Choo Choo. Had one of his biggest hits ever with a song that I really like, Catch a Falling Star, in 1958. And for some, that would have been the pinnacle of everything. But Cuomo had an amazing Indian summer in the 70s and even into the 80s. He continued to produce albums throughout the 50s and 60s, and they sold very well because he was a much beloved singer, and RCA gave him really good support right up until the end. But it was in the early 70s, and 73 in particular, where an unlikely hit for Cuomo, or Como, depending, going into the Val Olympics, became a huge hit. And this was a contemporary song. This was a song by Don McLean, one of the best singer-songwriters of all time. You might remember him from American Pie or Vincent. But another song that he did in the early 70s was And I Love You So. And Perry Como in 73 had a huge hit with the song and really turned it into a kind of beautiful traditional torch song. And it was absolutely wonderful. And this set off what I call a kind of Indian summer for Como, where by the late 70s, he was starting to actually get much more adventurous with the arrangements of the music and even with the song choices. His self-titled album from 1980 is arguably his best. It's one of my sort of three favorites of his, and it had so many good songs. Not While I'm Around, wonderful. The song called Love, wonderful. When She Smiles, The Colors of My Life, Someone Is Waiting, You Are My World, wonderful. And again, when we go into sort of the latter decades of his career, from 1983, So It Goes, a wonderful, wonderful album. Frankly, not a bad track on the album. You should definitely listen to it. And his final studio album ever, which represents the sort of swan song, was called Perry Como Today from 1987. The voice was still there, the arrangements more adventurous than ever, the song selection more diverse than ever. And true, by 87, while his fans were buying the album, the people that had followed him in some cases from the 1940s all the way up to the 1980s, I think that it's an album, along with all of his late 70s and 80s work, that really ought to be revisited because far from resting on his laurels, he was someone that continued to, within the sort of parameters of that classic traditional pop style, he was expanding horizons musically and performing really well, just as he always did. The man took very good care of his voice. So check out some of the Perry Como stuff that you won't necessarily see on the top of the Spotify list or what on the top of the Billboard charts from back in the day. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.